updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning, John Cass, johncassnews.com.
Thanks, Danny. Good morning.
We talked a little bit about reading as part of our discussion about Ross Douthat's Age of Extinction piece in the New York Times. This is an interesting experiment that is going to be conducted at the University of Colorado. We're going to find out if college students can read. We know they don't read. That's sort of the starting point. But can they actually read? Will they rise to the challenge of intellectual rigor?
Can they read to Dan Proft's standards?
Well, or perhaps even a higher one. But yeah, I mean, it's not that long ago. I mean, It is actually a little bit long ago. But even leftist institutions like where I matriculated for college, I mean, there was reading required. I mean, it's certainly at the high school level too, almost as rigorous as college.
Where you first learned about the italic precede and the phrase "in which," and then
yes,
continued.
Yes, we went from there exactly.
I can't wait to our next guest because I just want to hear the reading list.
Me too. Joseph Bottum is a writer, author. He's also was invited to be a visiting chair in conservative thought and policy for the coming academic year at the University of Colorado by the university's Benson Center for the Study of Western Civilization. His most recent book is Frankincense, Gold, and Myrrh, a Christmas Christomathy. He joins us now. Joseph Bottum, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here.
The genesis of this experiment that you're going to impose upon the skulls full of mush at Boulder.
Well, it was just discussion about the kind of survey course that college students used to have to take that I took all those decades ago.
I took it too.
Where we were given a novel a week to read. And because it was thought that the novel was this fundamentally important thing in modern civilization. And so we just, we'd start at Don Quixote and we'd read through to, the Faulkner. And the idea was that you needed this to understand why the modern age decided that this long-form fiction was going to be the device by which, more than any other, we try to explain ourselves to ourselves.
And somewhere along the way, the humanities lost any sort of self-respect and allowed politics to lay siege to this sort of coursework.
Yes, and yet more. It was like an unholy trinity. First of all, the humanities professors lost their nerve, decided politics was more important and that literature no longer was a fundamental purpose of education. And then you had this kind of American pragmatism that says, well, why do my kids have to learn any of that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
That forgot about the uplifting nature of literature. And then you had the bureaucrats who have won the long war for control of the university over the faculty. And they're essentially running the universities, the content of these courses, based on consumer satisfaction forms. And if the kids complain that there was too much reading, they'll tell the professors to cut down on the reading. And that unholy trinity of a kind of class warfare between the bureaucrats and the academics, and the politicization in the failure of nerve and these people no longer believing what they did was important, and then a kind of, low-level American suspicion of anything highfalutin. The three of them combined to reduce literature. In the 1960s, English was first or second largest major in the universities. Today, it barely exists as a major.
And so let's give us the syllabus, or at least part of the syllabus for the course, if you can disclose any of this. I don't want to give the students the heads up here, but how many Nicholas Sparks, John Grisham novels are part of the syllabus?
Henry Fielding starts there.
Not a whole lot of stuff, but it used to be like the professors I had wouldn't assign any popular fiction because they assumed you would read those on your own.
Yes.
Right? So they didn't have to assign them in college. The idea was, that you had to have an understanding of what Jane Austen was doing and what the birth of the modern novel really in 18th century England with Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe and Fielding's Tom Jones and Richardson's Clarissa. That there emerged a new thing that was the novel, that was going to try and address the fundamental problems of modern times, which are how, more than anything else, how is it that the individual, this unique thing that the modern age had really brought to the fore, from Descartes down to the American founders, this individual person is going to live in a world of society, a world of sin and crime, and a world in which the manifestations of God are increasingly harder to find. You have those three problems, and art emerged to address them, and that fundamental art was the novel.
That was the way a people described itself, explained itself, themselves to itself. But now we don't read. There's no reading. There's no literature. Have newspapers, before they began to collapse of their own sodden weight, had newspapers fit that bill of filling what the novel used to do?
I don't think so. I think, first of all, if you ever talked to one of the old newspapermen, the gray hairs.
You're talking to one.
When I was starting out, the gray hairs would have said, well, of course, poets and novelists are the peak of writing. Now, they would have, sneered at something, but I would have listened to any of those gray hairs talk for hours about Hemingway. Because it was, and every newspaperman of a certain generation in the 50s, 40s, and 50s had in the bottom desk drawer an unfinished great American novel that he was working on.
Right.
Because they knew, somewhere inside, they knew that the novel was the thing that we were going to try and use to understand the glories of the modern age.
Is it a thing now?
Now, I don't know that anybody does, and yet, of course, the modern age is fundamentally under attack. The things that made modernity, the Protestant Reformation, and now the main line is essentially gone, and science, and you have people writing papers about how Newton's Principia is a rate manual, and all the things, bureaucracy, all what Max Weber would have called the elective affinities that created the modern age, one by one, they're under fundamental attack, and to the point where very few people will defend the age of exploration and Columbus, for example, anymore. The things that made the modern age are under attack, with the result that the modern age itself is under attack. And you tell these kids, well, there are problems of modernity that we have to face up to, and the novel is where we tried to face up to them. Where we tried to say, how do I live as an individual? What are the alternate lives in a world that I did not make myself, that has other people in it?
Is this going to be sort of like the Great Books course at University of Chicago? I know you made reference in your piece in the Journal to what Wilford McClay did at the University of Oklahoma. He's a friend of the show. He wrote the book Land of Hope, which was intended to be a sort of American history book to respond to Howard Zinn, in addition to other things. I mean, and you mentioned he did this several years ago too at the University of Oklahoma, and it seemed, according to you, to be a rousing success. I'm just trying to get like the I know which you're describing in terms of the big questions you want explored by the students, and this reading in that direction, but the expanse of the course.
Yeah, I mean, in education as it once was, this survey course on the novel would be only part, and probably a small part,
Right.
of the general history of Western civilization. What's extraordinary is that we've given up on Western civilization, or the universities have, and it's kind of emerged in what I call a new Bohemia, where this world outside of the mainstream, outside of the universities, which have all been taken over by, the lunatics, but outside there in YouTube videos and small magazines and online things, you get people saying, you really can't understand this unless you start with Socrates. You really can't understand why Thomas Aquinas is such a major figure unless you've got this history of Western civilization. No matter how weak it is, you need, in my understanding, you need like cubby holes. You need a frame so that new information has a place to go when you get it. And we used to conceive of college as providing those cubby holes, providing that frame, so that the learning one got later in life, the reading one did, the thinking one did, had a place to go. And now it's just scattered fragments. That, as T.S. Eliot said, in The Wasteland, I have shored against my ruins.
In your piece in the Wall Street Journal, I'll read this. Descriptions of eras, from Jane Austen's to James Joyce. Genres laid out from Rousseau and the novel of sentiment to Kerouac and the beat novel. My question, because Dan is an enemy of sentimentality, where did the novels of sentiment begin?
They really began in the 18th century in France, Man of Sentiment in England. It was a short-lived genre trying to explain Rousseauian romanticism through the device of the novel. Mm-hmm. And thank God the novel, the stream of the novel went away from it very quickly. Because it was Rousseau, and who needed this? But on the other hand, Rousseau himself was responding to what he clearly saw, the problem of the modern age, which is that it's stripped us of our connections that the medievals would have had to a thick world, a world with ghosts and angels and a sense of permeation by the divine. Everything that modernity did, from science stripping away all that stuff in our understanding of the physical world, and exploration stripping all that stuff away from the globe, everything that the modern age did was a kind of disenchantment of the world, taking away the magic. And Rousseau was smart. I mean, he was awful, but he perceived the problem very clearly. And the problem is, what do we do when we live in a world from which we are disconnected? We live in a thin world instead of a thick world. And the novel of sentiment emerged in the 18th century as a brief flurry of novels trying to explain that Rousseauian claim to the rest of us and how it might impact our lives in story.
There's not a lot of positive developments occurring in higher education right now. There are a few, University of Austin, but I'm encouraged that there's a center at the University of Colorado that would sponsor a course like this. I know University of North Carolina has opened a similar sort of civic life center that aims to reintroduce Western civilization to the curriculum. But do you see this as a movement afoot in higher education, or are these just one-offs?
Oh, sweet Lord, I hope it's a movement, but I doubt that it actually is. What this is a sign of how much we have lost our way, that a new politically neutral course on just the history of the novel as an art form at a place designated to study Western civilization should be taken by those titles alone as conservative.
Yeah,
neutrality in academia is a conservative position. The idea that there are these forms of art that we forward enormously is taken as a conservative idea. If you refuse to politicize something, you are therefore a conservative. And that fact is a sign of just how far we've fallen. Witness the fact that the English department refused to cross-list my course.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
The English department at the University of Colorado refused to cross-list my course.
Yeah, that's no surprise. That's where it's at. No, that's well said. Joseph Bottum is an author and writer. You can read his work at poemsancientandmodern.substack.com, poemsancientandmodern.substack.com. Joseph Bottum, thanks so much for joining us. I can't wait to hear or read the write-up on how this course goes come next semester.
Thanks so much for having me.
Can we read some of the papers that the students will write? I would like
authority to disclose those. But
yeah, I would like a representative sampling.
It's going to be punishing enough for him to have to read them.
I'll pass it along.
Yeah. Joseph Bottum, thanks so much for joining us, and he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Welcome back to Ask Hasselus. I'm Weston. What's your question?
What makes Hasselus mattress different?
Aside from employee-free showrooms, free next-day delivery and haul away, and way too low prices on Beautyrest, Sealy Posturepedic, and Serta Perfect Sleeper?
Yeah, besides that.
Well, Hasselus is locally owned.
You mean your franchise is locally owned?
We're not a franchise. Every showroom is owned and managed by the same family.